There is a silence that follows intelligent people wherever they go. It is not the silence of peace, but of distance, a subtle estrangement that hangs in the air, as if their very presence carries a dissonant frequency most would rather not hear. They are among the crowd, but never of it. They walk the same streets, enter the same rooms, exchange the same pleasantries, yet behind their eyes lives another world. Society senses this, though it rarely names it. It manifests instead as unease, as quiet suspicion, as the unspoken recognition that this person is different in a way that unsettles. The intelligent individual is not feared for aggression, nor despised for failure. They are feared because they cannot be absorbed. They stand apart, and in standing apart, they force others to see themselves reflected in a mirror they did not choose to face. Schopenhauer understood this estrangement as a natural consequence of deeper vision. The ordinary mind survives by clinging to illusions of progress, of meaning in social games, of fulfillment in endless striving. But intelligence, sharpened like a blade, cuts through these veils. It exposes the hollow mechanics of ambition, the vanity of status, the emptiness of rituals performed simply because everyone else performs them. If you feel the weight of these words echo in your own life, stay with the journey, subscribe, and let us walk further into the shadows together, toward the truth society fears, but your soul already knows. Here lies the paradox. Society depends on these illusions to function. People need to believe in their work, their communities, their stories. Without belief, the structure collapses, and so the intelligent individual, by seeing too clearly, becomes a threat, not by rebellion but by observation alone. They embody the archetype of the outsider. In Jungian language, they are the one who refuses fusion with the collective unconscious, who cannot merge with the comfort of the tribe. To be intelligent, then, is to be estranged, and to be estranged is to carry the burden of alienation. It begins early, often before words form. The intelligent child looks around and wonders why others accept so easily what feels absurd. They see the cracks in authority, the contradictions in adult behavior, the way words and actions rarely align. While others obey, they observe. While others play along, they ask why the game exists at all. This is not rebellion in the usual sense. It is perception, a sensitivity to the underlying emptiness of conventions. And from the beginning, such perception makes them suspect. Teachers label them difficult. Peers label them strange. Families worry that something is wrong. What is truly wrong, however, is not within the intelligent child, but within the collective's need to suppress dissonance. Jung spoke of the persona, the mask we wear to survive within the group. For most, the mask fuses with the skin until it is indistinguishable from the face beneath. But for the intelligent, the mask always feels artificial, heavy, suffocating. They sense the game and cannot forget it is a game. They may wear the mask when required, but it never becomes them, and others sense this. The crowd distrusts those who cannot disappear into the crowd. Alienation grows sharper with age. In adolescence, when belonging feels like survival, the intelligent mind feels both a curse and a wound. While others chase approval, they feel a gnawing emptiness in conformity. They long for authenticity, but authenticity is what the group punishes most. Here the first shadow forms, the sense of exile. The intelligent adolescent learns that their clarity is not welcome, that truth, spoken plainly, provokes rejection. So they grow silent, carrying their insights inward. They laugh at the jokes they do not find funny. They nod at beliefs they do not share. Outwardly they pass. Inwardly they suffocate. This is where many begin to feel that something is wrong with them, not because they lack intelligence, but because society cannot tolerate the mirror they hold up. The group whispers, "You are too much, too strange, too different." And in time, the intelligent may begin to believe it. They begin to mistake alienation for defect, solitude for failure. Yet what is actually happening is far more profound. Society is rejecting them not for who they are, but for what they reveal. The presence of intelligence is a mirror too polished, too clear, too merciless. Most would rather shatter the mirror than face what it reflects. Schopenhauer described ordinary life as driven by the will, a blind striving that compels people to chase desires without end. The intelligent person, however, sees the mechanism for what it is. They notice that achievement does not end hunger, that possessions do not secure peace, that social victories do not banish emptiness. They recognize in quiet horror that much of human life is theater, a repetition of roles designed to conceal an underlying void, and because they see this, they cannot fully join the play. They may act their part, but they act it consciously, aware that the stage is fragile. Others sense this awareness, though they cannot name it. It makes them uncomfortable. It disturbs the comfort of belief. Thus, intelligence frightens not because it is superior, but because it threatens exposure. The intelligent person is the stranger in the crowd, the silent figure who reminds others that their roles are roles, their masks are masks, their games are games. And this reminder feels dangerous. This fear society holds toward intelligence is not unlike the fear of death. Both represent the stripping away of illusions, the confrontation with naked truth. Just as death reminds us that time is finite, intelligence reminds us that much of what we cling to is hollow. Both provoke anxiety because both are undeniable, and yet both are endlessly avoided. So society develops defenses. It ridicules the intelligent. It dismisses them as arrogant, detached, or eccentric. It silences them through ridicule or ignores them into irrelevance. It brands them with labels: introvert, outcast, misfit, not to understand them but to neutralize their dissonance. Yet beneath the rejection lies a secret envy. For even as society fears the intelligent, it also hungers for their vision. It is drawn, however reluctantly, to those who can articulate what others only sense in vague unease. And so the intelligent live in paradox, feared for their clarity, yet needed for the very same reason. To stand as a stranger in the crowd is to carry a wound that never fully closes, but it is also to carry a gift, for in alienation clarity deepens. In rejection, perception sharpens. The outsider may be feared, but they are also free from the illusions that bind the many. The first step in this journey, then, is acceptance, not of society's rejection, but of one's own estrangement as a mark of vision. To understand that alienation is not a defect but a destiny, to see oneself not as broken, but as chosen for the difficult path of perception. Here begins the arc. The realization that intelligence is not a curse to be hidden, but a mirror to be carried. And though the crowd may look away, the mirror remains, reflecting what most cannot bear to see. This is why intelligent people scare society. They carry the silence of truth in a world that survives on noise. The world does not survive on truth, it survives on masks. Civilization is a theater, and each of us is cast into a role long before we are aware that we are acting. The child learns quickly that to be accepted is to perform, to smile when praised, to lower their voice when scolded, to say what is expected, not what is true. Slowly the mask forms. Jung called it the persona, the social skin, carefully crafted, not to reveal, but to conceal. It is not deception in the malicious sense, but rather the price of entry into the collective. Without it, we risk exile. But there are some who cannot wear the mask without suffocation. For them, the cloth of conformity burns against the skin. They sense the weight of the performance, the fragile bargain on which society rests, and when they begin to see through it, they frighten those who do not dare to look. For most, the mask is a comfort. It is security. It spares them from the abyss of insignificance. It tells them who they are, a professional, a patriot, a parent, a believer. These identities are fragile, stitched together by repetition and ritual, but they shield the heart from terror. For beneath them lies a truth too heavy to hold. That much of life is empty theater, that most pursuits are distractions, that meaning is not handed down, but must be wrestled out of the silence. The intelligent individual cannot help but perceive these cracks. They see how language is used less to reveal reality and more to disguise it. How words serve as smokescreens for insecurity. How conversations mask fear of silence. how moral posturing hides the hunger for approval. What most call virtue, the intelligent often recognize as obedience. What most call wisdom, they discern as memorized convention. And what most defend as tradition is, in truth, a mask stretched thin over decay. This is why intelligence unsettles. It is not that the intelligent intend rebellion. Often, they long to belong like anyone else. But their perception pierces. Their gaze, even if silent, becomes unbearable to the mediocre. To be near someone who sees through the mask is to risk one's own disguise slipping, and so society reacts defensively. It shuns the seer. It ridicules the outlier. It brands them arrogant, bitter, antisocial. Anything so long as the mask remains intact. Mediocrity thrives not on malice but on inertia. It does not desire truth, it desires comfort. Its rituals are repeated precisely because they prevent disruption. The office small talk, the family, obligations, the patriotic slogans, they are not designed to reveal anything profound, but to soothe the terror of uncertainty. To pierce through them is to shatter the illusion, and illusions are what allow the collective to keep moving. Schopenhauer observed that ordinary minds seek solace in repetition. They find pleasure in what is familiar, safe, expected. But higher, minds are tormented by truth, unable to rest in imitation. And here lies the tragedy. What comforts the many suffocates the few. The intelligent are like lungs dropped into shallow water. They cannot breathe in the stagnant air of performance. Their very survival demands they step outside the script. Yet, in doing so they invite hostility, for to unmask mediocrity is to hold up a mirror. And when the mediocre look into it, they see their own fear reflected. Fear of being insignificant, fear of being unoriginal, fear of being exposed. This is not a fear they can name, so they project it outward. They call the intelligent cold, detached pretentious. They laugh at their seriousness, mock their solitude, diminish their vision. The goal is not truth but containment, to push the outsider back behind the mask, or else to exile them entirely. What makes this hostility so corrosive is that it is often unconscious. Society does not openly admit, "We fear you because you see through us." Instead, it cloaks its rejection in moral tones. The intelligent are labeled selfish for valuing solitude, arrogant for doubting convention, ungrateful for refusing shallow rewards. In truth, these accusations are projections. They are the collective's attempt to defend itself against an uncomfortable light. Consider how quickly truth-tellers in any age are dismissed as dangerous, not because they wield weapons, but because they unmask illusions. The philosopher, the artist, the seer, their crime is not violence but clarity. They say aloud what others sense in the silence but refuse to face. And in that moment, the crowd must choose. Remove the mask or remove the voice. History shows which choice it prefers. This is why intelligent people often find themselves isolated, not because they wish to be alone, but because society's masks cannot tolerate their gaze. Their presence threatens to unravel the performance. They carry within them what Jung called the archetype of the rebel, not the violent destroyer, but the one who stands apart, embodying an integrity that the collective cannot contain. Their rebellion is not loud but silent, not theatrical but existential. It is the refusal to bow before illusions, even at the cost of belonging. The emotional wound here is deep. To see through masks is not merely an intellectual act, it is an existential burden. It means knowing that much of what binds people together, their rituals, their moralizing, their convictions, is fragile theater. It means watching mediocrity parade as wisdom and being unable to join the applause. It means living in a world where the price of belonging is self-betrayal. And yet, there is power in this estrangement. For once the mask is seen, it cannot be unseen. To recognize mediocrity's disguise is to awaken a latent strength, the capacity to rebel inwardly, not in reckless destruction, but in quiet authenticity. The intelligent exile learns to value clarity over comfort, depth over acceptance, integrity over applause. In rejecting the mask, they begin to glimpse something rarer than belonging, the outline of the true self. This is where Jung's insights cut deeply. The persona, he warned, is necessary, but when mistaken for the self, it becomes a prison. Most live and die within this prison, confusing the role with the reality. But the intelligent, by their very perception, are thrust into confrontation with this illusion. They are pushed to discover the shadow behind the mask, to endure the loneliness of authenticity, to walk the dangerous path of individuation. This way the hostility of society becomes a strange form of initiation. The exile is not a mistake, but a summons. To be rejected for piercing through masks is to be invited to shed one's own. The pain of alienation becomes the doorway to transformation. And though the world resents this clarity, though mediocrity recoils from the mirror, the intelligent individual carries within them a secret power. They cannot unsee what they have seen. The fire of truth is not easily extinguished. It may isolate, it may wound, but it also illuminates. And in time it reveals that beneath the fragile theater of mediocrity, something more enduring waits, the raw material of authenticity, the possibility of a life not bound by performance. The intelligent exile becomes, paradoxically, more human than those who cling to masks. For to see through illusion is not to abandon humanity, but to reclaim it. It is to live not as a role but as a soul, and that is what society fears most. Not destruction, not violence, but the quiet presence of someone who cannot be deceived. Someone who embodies the truth that masks cannot hold forever. Someone whose very existence whispers that another way of living is possible. There comes a moment in the life of the intelligent individual when masks no longer suffice. They have seen too deeply, pierced too many veils, and now the theater of collective existence no longer offers refuge. What once felt like home becomes a stage too small, too fragile, too false. And in that rupture they are cast into a space most people dread, solitude. To most, solitude is emptiness, deprivation, punishment. It is the silence that follows after the party ends, the space where one's distractions collapse, leaving the naked self exposed. But for those who see through illusions, solitude is not a choice. It is an inevitability. They find themselves pushed to the margins, not because they despise company, but because company despises their depth. And so they carry the wound of estrangement, the knowledge that their clarity has cost them belonging. Schopenhauer once wrote that the higher a mind rises, the more it gravitates towards solitude. Ordinary people, he observed, cannot endure being alone with themselves. They seek constant noise, company, diversion. They flee into chatter, rituals, amusements, anything that spares them the confrontation with inner silence. But the intelligent, precisely because they perceive the hollowness of distraction, are left standing in the desert of aloneness. This desert is no gentle landscape. It is vast, barren, echoing with the absence of affirmation. Days pass without validation. Conversations dwindle into triviality. The intelligent wanderer finds themselves asking, is it me who is broken, or the world that refuses to see? The doubt corrodes. For to walk alone is not merely a social condition, it is an existential test. Here lies the paradox. Solitude wounds, yet it also transforms. In solitude, the intelligent are stripped of illusions about belonging. They can no longer measure their worth through applause, can no longer rest on the borrowed identities of the crowd. They must face the mirror without disguise, and in that mirror they encounter both horror and possibility. The horror is the shadow. Jung warned that when the persona falls away, the shadow emerges with ferocity. In the silence of solitude, suppressed rage, grief, and longing surface. Old wounds reopen. The intelligent exile hears the voices of doubt. You are unlovable, you are strange, you are destined to be alone forever. These voices tempt surrender. They whisper that the pain is proof of failure, that the price of authenticity was too high. But solitude, if endured, carries a deeper gift. For when the voices grow loudest, when despair thickens, the soul begins to glimpse something beyond. It realizes that meaning cannot be outsourced to the crowd. That value does not depend on applause. That companionship, however sweet, is not the source of identity. The intelligent individual discovers that beneath the wound of isolation lies a strange power, the ability to draw life not from imitation but from within. This discovery is no instant revelation. It is earned through nights of despair, through the slow agony of silence, through the temptation to return to masks. Yet every time the exile resists the lure of shallow conformity, they grow stronger. Solitude ceases to be mere absence and begins to reveal its presence. In the stillness, the mind awakens to depths unnoticed in noise. Patterns emerge, insights unfold. The soul, once desperate for company, begins to hear its own voice. Philosophers have long recognized this paradox. Nietzsche warned that he who cannot be a loner should beware of talking about truth, for truth, unlike illusion, is not found in the crowd, but in the abyss of one's own silence. Kierkegaard, too, spoke of the knight of faith, who walks alone misunderstood, yet whose solitude is the very condition for authenticity. To stand apart is not weakness, but initiation. Still, the weight of solitude is not to be romanticized. It is crushing. It presses on the chest, suffocates with silence, gnaws with longing. Even the strongest minds falter beneath it. Many retreat. They put the mask back on, re-enter the performance, accept the comfort of half-truths, and society welcomes them back, relieved to see the mirror covered again. But those who endure, who refuse to betray the clarity they have, soon slowly discover that solitude is not exile but alchemy. In solitude, one undergoes a kind of death. The old self, built on roles and expectations, begins to wither. The illusions that once gave security dissolve. At first, this feels like annihilation, but in time, it becomes liberation. For in losing the borrowed self, the possibility of a truer self emerges. Jung called this process individuation, the long, painful journey of becoming who one truly is, rather than what society demands. Solitude, far from being a curse, becomes the crucible of this transformation. The intelligent. Individual learns to sit with silence until it speaks. They come to see that solitude is not empty, but alive with hidden currents. They begin to sense archetypes stirring in the depths, the hermit, the sage, the wanderer. These figures symbolize not despair, but guidance, inner teachers who remind. The exile that loneliness is not an end, but a passage. Slowly, the wound of solitude reshapes itself into strength. The intelligent individual no longer craves approval in the same way. They may still long for connection, but it is no longer the desperate hunger to be validated by the crowd. They begin to seek resonance, not recognition. Depth, not distraction. Few companions, perhaps, but genuine ones. And if such souls are rare, the intelligent exile learns to walk with their absence as with a friend. This does not mean the pain disappears. Loneliness remains. The ache of not being understood still haunts, but it no longer defines. Instead, it sharpens. It becomes the silence out of which creativity is born, the soil from which wisdom grows, the backdrop against which the true self shines. This is why solitude frightens society as much as intelligence itself. For the one who has endured solitude is no longer beholden to masks. They cannot be manipulated by ridicule, bribed by applause, or seduced by empty rituals. They have faced the abyss and found themselves intact. And such a soul carries an authority that unsettles, not the authority of domination, but of presence. In time, solitude ceases to feel like exile at all. It becomes a homeland of its own, austere, quiet, demanding, but also alive with clarity. The intelligent exile begins to realize that the very condition that once felt like punishment is in fact the foundation of freedom. They no longer fear being misunderstood, for they have survived it. They no longer fear being alone, for they have transformed it. And so the paradox fulfills itself. The weight of solitude, once unbearable, becomes the very force that grants endurance. The intelligent individual emerges not bitter, but tempered, not broken, but sharpened. They are no longer at the mercy of mediocrity's approval, for they have discovered a deeper belonging, the belonging to themselves. This is the gift hidden in the wound. Solitude strips away illusions, crushes dependence, exposes shadows, but in doing so, it reveals the seed of authenticity. And when that seed takes root, the exile becomes something far more dangerous than society ever feared. an individual who does not need its masks to live. There comes a moment in the journey of every intelligent soul when solitude no longer feels like exile, but something darker stirs in its place. Silence becomes a mirror too clear to avoid, and in its reflection emerges what society has long trained us to deny: the shadow. The shadow is everything the persona refuses to acknowledge. It is the anger buried beneath politeness, the envy hidden behind praise, the fear masked by confidence. Jung taught that the shadow does not disappear simply because we repress it. On the contrary, repression strengthens it. What is denied does not dissolve. It gathers force in the dark, waiting for the moment it can no longer be contained. For the intelligent individual, the shadow's awakening is inevitable. Why? Because clarity dissolves illusions, and illusions are what keep the shadow at bay. Ordinary minds can hide their envy in gossip, their rage in ritual, their fear in distraction. But the intelligent, whose eyes pierce masks, are left defenseless before their own. They see not only the hypocrisy of others, but the fractures within themselves. This recognition is terrifying. The shadow is not a monster in others, it is the monster within. It whispers in the intelligent soul's ear: "You are not as noble as you appear. You crave what you condemn. You despise in others what you cannot admit in yourself." These whispers cut deeper than external rejection ever could, for they strip the intelligent of their own self-image. They reveal the truth Schopenhauer hinted at, that human will is not rational but raw, selfish, driven by appetites we dare not name. The first stage of shadow confrontation is resistance. The intelligent exile tells themselves that these impulses are mistakes, accidents, contaminations to be purged. They attempt to rise above them through reason, through asceticism, through denial. But repression only sharpens the shadow's teeth. The more it is buried, the more violently it erupts, in sudden outbursts of rage, in corrosive cynicism, in quiet self-loathing. The shadow always finds its way back. The second stage is projection. Unable to face their own darkness, the intelligent may begin to see it everywhere else. They notice the vanity, greed, or deceit of others with ruthless clarity, condemning what secretly dwells within themselves. Here, intelligence becomes a weapon, sharpened not against truth, but against its own bearer. The exile risks becoming the very thing they despise, a critic so consumed with shadows in others that they remain blind to their own. It is at this stage that many fall. They become bitter, cynical, endlessly dissecting the corruption of the world while rotting inside. Their intelligence curdles into venom, their solitude becomes poison. And society, ironically, is relieved, for what is more harmless than an intelligent soul trapped in their own hatred? But if the intelligent endure, if they resist the temptation to project or repress, they discover something extraordinary. The shadow is not merely an enemy. It is also a guide. Jung insisted that the shadow, though dangerous, contains the seeds of vitality. Our creativity, our passion, even our moral strength often spring from the very instincts we seek to deny. Rage, when owned, becomes the fire that resists oppression. Desire, when integrated, becomes the drive to create. Fear, when faced, becomes the compass pointing toward growth. The task is not to destroy the shadow, but to befriend it, to step into the dark room and listen to what has been silenced. This requires courage of a rare kind, not the courage to fight the world, but the courage to sit with oneself. The intelligent soul must allow the shadow to speak, to confess its hunger, its grief, its wounds, and in doing so they begin to understand that the shadow is not evil in itself. It is simply unlived life. Here lies the revenge of the shadow. What you refuse to live will live itself without you. Repressed desires surface as compulsions. Buried rage explodes as destruction. Suppressed grief corrodes into apathy. The shadow takes its revenge not by attacking from outside, but by hollowing from within. The intelligent individual learns that to deny the shadow is to forfeit freedom. Integration is the only path forward. Integration does not mean indulgence. To integrate the shadow is not to give it free rein, but to give it recognition. It means acknowledging, yes, I am capable of cruelty. Yes, I harbor envy. Yes, I fear. Insignificance. In admitting this, the intelligent exile reclaims the energy once wasted on denial. The shadow no longer has to force its way through explosions and compulsions. It becomes a companion, dark, unsettling, but honest. And something remarkable happens. Once the shadow is faced, the intelligent individual begins to sense a new kind of wholeness. They are no longer split between mask and impulse, persona and repression. They move through the world with a presence that is difficult to name. They are not innocent, but they are real. They are not pure, but they are whole. This wholeness is dangerous, not to the individual, but to society. For society thrives on division, on masks, on people pretending to be less than they are. The integrated individual cannot be easily manipulated. They are not blackmailed by their flaws, for they have already owned them. They are not controlled by fear, for they have already faced it. They are not seduced by shallow praise, for they no longer need the mask of perfection. To the collective, such a soul appears almost mythic. They carry both light and dark, both wisdom and raw instinct without apology. They are the warrior who can wield fire without being consumed by it, the sage who can walk through chaos without losing themselves. They embody what Jung called the self, the union of opposites, the reconciliation of what was once denied. But this path is costly. The integration of the shadow demands that the intelligent exiles surrender the comfort of superiority. They must admit they are not above the instincts of the masses, only more honest about them. They must accept that intelligence does not purify but deepens. It forces one to see both brilliance and brutality more clearly. To integrate is to give up the fantasy of purity and embrace the truth of complexity. And so the shadow's revenge is fulfilled not in destruction, but in transformation. What was once feared becomes a source of strength. What was once hidden becomes a source of authenticity. The intelligent individual, by confronting their own darkness, becomes less fragile, less divided, less dependent on masks. They become someone who has walked through fire and returned intact. The world senses this, though it cannot name it. People feel unsettled in the presence of an integrated soul, for such a person cannot be dismissed as naive nor condemned as corrupt. They stand as proof that human beings can be more than their illusions. And this proof threatens the foundations of collective comfort. The revenge of the shadow, then, is twofold. On the personal level, it demands recognition or inflicts destruction. On the collective level, it creates individuals who are immune to manipulation, immune to shallow conformity, immune to fear. These are the souls who, by embracing their darkness, radiate a light society cannot control. This is why the shadow must be faced. To deny it is to become its victim. To integrate it is to become its master. And mastery, in this sense, is not domination but dialogue. It is the lifelong practice of listening to what the shadow reveals and allowing it to deepen rather than destroy the self. When the intelligent exile emerges from this confrontation, they are no longer merely intelligent. They are wise, for wisdom is not knowledge of light alone, but the ability to hold light and darkness in the same hand without flinching. And so the journey continues. The exile who once fled into solitude, who once felt crushed by its weight, now carries both shadow and self into the world. They are not flawless, they are not saints, but they are whole. And wholeness in a fractured world is the most radical act of all. If the shadow is the deepest confrontation of the intelligent soul, freedom is its heaviest inheritance. The exile who integrates the shadow does not return to society as they once were. They carry something that cannot be unseen, something that both liberates and isolates them further, the recognition that they are free. At first glance, freedom appears as the great prize. Philosophers, poets, and revolutionaries alike have exalted it, yet for the intelligent individual, freedom is not simply the absence of chains. It is the collapse of excuses. It is the unbearable truth that no one else can live your life for you. No tradition can guarantee your meaning. No authority can absolve you of choice. This realization is terrifying because it strips the individual bare. Society thrives on giving. People scripts, rules to follow, identities to wear, beliefs to inherit. These scripts offer protection from the chaos of existence. They tell you who you are, what to desire, what to fear, what to believe in. But once intelligence peels away the illusion, the scripts are revealed for what they are: collective dreams. Comforting but fragile, the intelligent exile sees through this. They recognize that freedom means stepping beyond these inherited roles into the vast, uncertain wilderness of self-determination. And here lies the burden. Freedom demands responsibility. Every choice, every act, every silence becomes one's own. No scapegoat remains. This burden often manifests as dread. Kierkegaard described it as the dizziness of freedom, that vertigo we feel when gazing into infinite possibility. Freedom is not a gentle gift. It is a heavy weight. To be free is to stand at the edge of the abyss and realize there are no guarantees, only choices. Many flee from this weight. They retreat into conformity, surrender their freedom to institutions, dissolve themselves into collectives. This escape is what Erich Fromm called the fear of freedom, the desperate urge to trade autonomy for belonging, to exchange choice for comfort. And society welcomes this trade, for obedient citizens are far easier to govern than free individuals, but the integrated exile cannot return. Once the illusion has been pierced, it cannot be restored. They may play along, but they cannot forget what they know, and so they must carry freedom even when it burns their hands. The first response to this burden is often despair. What is the point of life if no absolute meaning exists? What is the worth of striving if all ends in death? Here the intelligent confronts what Schopenhauer named the essence of existence: endless striving without final satisfaction, will without rest. The exile feels the futility of it all pressing down on them. Yet within this despair lies the seed of transformation. For if no meaning is given, then meaning must be created. This is the turn Nietzsche envisioned when he declared, "God is dead." It was not merely a loss, but a challenge. Humanity must become the creators of value. For the intelligent exile, freedom is not the end of meaning, but the beginning of responsibility. The responsibility to carve meaning from the void. This carving is not arbitrary. It requires deep alignment with one's integrated self. To live authentically, the intelligent must shape a life that reflects both their light and shadow, their reason and instinct, their fragility and strength. They must listen to the quiet voice within that says, "This is yours to build, yours to bear, yours to lose." This task is not easy. Freedom means risk. Every authentic choice exposes one to rejection, to failure, to loneliness. To love deeply risks heartbreak. To create risks obscurity. To speak truth risks condemnation. But without this risk, life withers into imitation. The exile learns that the cost of safety is the death of authenticity. The burden of freedom, then, is also its gift. For in bearing it, one discovers a strange kind of dignity. No matter how harsh the world, no matter how indifferent existence may seem, the individual who creates meaning stands unbroken. Their life is not borrowed from tradition, nor dictated by authority. It is their own, and fragile, imperfect, but real. This dignity radiates. People sense it in those rare individuals who carry themselves with quiet strength, who do not cling to illusions nor demand applause. They move differently, as if their anchor lies deeper than approval, deeper than fear. These are the souls who inspire without trying, whose very being whispers, "You too are free if you dare to bear it." But society does not celebrate such freedom. It fears it. For one free individual awakens the possibility of freedom in others, and this undermines every institution built on obedience. That is why intelligent, integrated souls often remain outsiders, admired from afar, but rarely embraced. Their freedom is contagious, and contagion threatens control. And yet it is precisely in this outsider status that their true role emerges. They become wayfarers, torchbearers, not leaders of movements but reminders of possibility. Their very existence testifies to what humans can endure, what humans can become once illusions are stripped away. They do not offer salvation, only example, a life lived without surrender to falsehood. The burden of freedom does not end. It is carried until death, but within its weight lies the strange paradox of liberation. that to accept the abyss is to learn how to build upon it. To accept mortality is to live more urgently. To accept suffering is to discover compassion. To accept solitude is to recognize authenticity. The intelligent exile thus completes their journey, not by escaping society, nor by conquering it, but by transcending its hold on their soul. They remain in the world but are not of it. They carry shadow and light, despair and meaning, freedom and burden, as inseparable companions. They are not heroes, not saints, but fully human, and in their full humanity lies their quiet power. In the end, the question is not whether freedom is heavy. It is. The question is whether we will bear it consciously or unconsciously, whether we will carry it with dignity or collapse under denial, whether we will forge meaning from the void or be consumed by it. This is the burden intelligent souls carry, and it is the path society fears. For nothing is more frightening than an individual who has faced their shadow, embraced their solitude, and chosen to live freely despite it all. Such a person cannot be controlled. Such a person cannot be broken. And perhaps this is why, as Schopenhauer suggested, society always fears the truly intelligent, for in them lies a reminder too dangerous to ignore, that each of us is free, and that freedom is both the heaviest weight and the only path to becoming whole.